holidays are here again, and I might as well go into reviewing an animated Christmas movie. In this case, an obscure computer-animated direct-to-video movie, In Search of Santa. When it comes to animated Christmas movies or specials, you would normally think of the more well-known stuff like The Grinch, the Rankin-Bass specials, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Klaus, and Arthur Christmas. But this movie is one of, if not the most obscure animated Christmas movie. And I don't mean the dark kind of obscure. I mean that there are barely any people talking about it on the internet. The most that I've seen of people talking about it is on sites like IMDb with a small amount. But what is known the most about it is its distributors. Who else would show it off to video stores in the holiday season of 2004 other than Paramount Home Entertainment in the international market and Miramax Home Entertainment with Disney in North America, back when Harvey Weinstein was one of the people in charge of Miramax? Yeah, that might have left a sour taste in your mouth when I mentioned that name. But anyways, I'm actually one of the rare people who actually remembers this film. I had a VHS copy of it from Disney when I was a kid, and I watched it constantly even during Christmas, and later on, I found a DVD counterpart at a local thrift store so that I could review it at some point. But nowadays, I have seen that the ratings aren't really that kind to the film looking on IMDb, so here I am right now doing this review to see how it holds up. And now that we're gonna go in search of Santa, I might as well take the time to answer that question. How does it hold up? Considering all the other computer-animated films set in the Arctic that I've had to suffer through, is it something worth retrieving from obscurity as a Christmas present, or should it be unanimous that nothing good can come out of fully computer-animated Arctic films?
Let's go!
In the kingdom of Royal Rookery Rock, located on a large island in the South Pole, Penguin King Calvin and Queen Penelope have hatched twin princesses by the names of Crystal and Lucinda. However, Lucinda kept trying to embarrass Crystal because the latter hatched a minute before her, and she seeks the help of three sneaky British-accented villain penguins from the royal court called the Terribly Deep Thinkers to steal Crystal's glory. Suddenly, one night, as Crystal and a fool named Eugene are walking out, a sleigh bell falls down from the sky and hits Crystal's head, and she and Eugene discover that the bell belonged to Santa Claus, attached to one of his reindeer. But just as Crystal tells her friends about it, she gets arrested by the guards on Lucinda's order, and is tried in court by the Deep Thinkers, yet found guilty of perjury regarding Santa's existence, and the Deep Thinkers burn down the cabin in which the evidence was found. Then Crystal sets off on a journey to the North Pole to find Santa, while Lucinda ditches the Deep Thinkers to help out her sister. And along the way, they overcome a leopard seal and a band of greedy Arctic pirates led by Captain Cragg. They eventually make it to the North Pole and gather even more actual evidence to prove Santa's existence. But when they discover that things have gotten worse since they left the island and that the Deep Thinkers have planned to steal their parents' throne, the Princess Twins realize that now they have to go back over there with the proof in order to stop the Deep Thinkers once and for all. Now, what can I say about this story? Oh god, it is one of the most generic and broken down Christmas stories that can ever be thought up, as it is focused on two princess twins who have a sibling rivalry early in the film's run. While Crystal may be just a dull protagonist, the foundation of the journey to find Santa is completely destroyed by Lucinda's despicable personality, to the point that I could question, why is this movie trying to make the jerk look like another heroine that people are supposed to root for along with her sister? This is surely from the nutjob levels of an unlikable deuteragonist. This is not to mention that this movie offers very little except so many other not fun to sit through cliches that have been done countless times by other kids films, like predictability from head to toe, the liar reveal trope that happens during the court scene, even A Bug's Life did it better, and dull juvenile slapstick, to the point where it can feel like this movie is putting in all this effort to make itself as bland as possible, and the pacing is out of place. It is so awful that the movie cannot properly decide how fast or how slow it wants to progress. Sometimes they would speed up the journey to the North Pole in order for Lucinda and Crystal to find Santa Claus as quickly as possible, and on the other hand, they are occupying the audience with juvenile jokes and bland song numbers. By the way, there are only 3 songs in this movie. First is Happy Hatch Day when it's the twins' hatch day.
Happy Hatch Day to you. You're looking real swell since you shattered your shell. Happy Hatch Day to you. Happy Hatch Day.
Then there's the terribly Deep Thinker song when the Deep Thinker set out to burn down the cabin in which Crystal and Eugene found the book of Santa Claus.
We're the terribly deep thinkers.
Our thoughts are very deep.
We are birds whose big words put lesser minds to sleep.
And lastly, there's Captain Crag's pirate song, which explains why he's called the nefarious Captain Crag.
The king of all the no-account, gnarly, nasty knaves. Who's that tusky tank of terror, who very rarely bathes?
He's known to boast and brag, the nefarious Captain Crag.
Tar, lads, you know me too well.
And each one is more dull than the last. As for what this movie thinks of as comedy, like I said earlier, it is just a bunch of god-awful juvenile cartoon slapstick. It is too awkward, too over-the-top, too childish, too poorly timed, and too unbearable to even be slightly funny. It doesn't help either that these moments come with a generic use of cartoon sound effects from Hanna-Barbera, which just adds to the poorly timed aspect of the humor.
Have a nice trip.
We are not amused.
The script is such an unrepairable mess that you're just left sitting there wondering how any of this is necessary. With a story that is as abysmally constructed and written as this, with all its awful cliches and stupid slapstick, there is little to no reason why I would engage in this level of storytelling.
And action.
With a hopeless script comes a cast of bland and annoying characters whose personalities can give the experience an extra layer of torturous. I may have stated this before, but one of the main characters, Princess Crystal, is just a generic protagonist who often gets clumsy until she perfects it, and wants to prove to the whole kingdom that Santa Claus is real. And then we have one of the biggest issues of this movie, the other main character, Princess Lucinda, whose arrogant nature at the beginning makes her an insufferable and repulsive douchebag that should not deserve to be one of the heroines for how her initial ego is making her a hypocrite. Their friends and family too have one-dimensional personalities, like how Eugene, the guy who serves as Crystal's guide, is the royal fool who fails to be funny. Max Elfman is just a dumb elf merchant who reluctantly hides his true identity. Captain Crag the Walrus and his pirate crew are just a dull group that start out as malicious antagonists, but later reform by the end. Pup is just there. Santa Claus is not only the jolly king of Christmas, but he also turns out to be a martial arts master for some reason, and King Calvin is the idiotic and overprotective father who doesn't believe Crystal's evidence of Santa. Back onto Max Elfman. He doesn't appear much in the movie, but when he does, I'm just there going, "Oh God, his voice is so irritating! Get that elf away from me! He's too annoying to even be part of this!"
Then you came for nothing, ain't you heard? Santa Claus don't exist. Now scram!
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
And this brings us to the Terribly Deep Thinkers, a trio of villainous court penguins with a master plan to steal the Arctic throne. They consist of Lady Agnesia, the leader, Diridamus, the wise guy, and Mort Motimes, the absent-minded old man. These three are a generic trio of villains who bring up another problem this movie has that I haven't talked about yet. This movie has elements that blatantly rip off other cartoons. While the writing and the animation, which I'll talk about next, have already shown that it's partially and shamelessly taking some elements from the Pebble and the Penguin and even Pablo from the Backyardigans, the villains themselves are trying to be somewhat like Team Rocket from the Pokemon anime. Agnesia as Jessie, Diridamus as James, and Mort Motimes as Meowth. How else can I describe these three? They deceive Crystal and later Lucinda, and their personalities are almost like Jessie, James, and Meowth. This film is that shameless. But to its credit, I will give it that Hilary and Haley Duff do give out some good performances as Crystal and Lucinda respectively. The rest of the regular voice cast is based in Canada, like Lee Tucker, Kathleen Barr, Scott McNeil, Gary Chalk, French Tickner, Dale Wilson, and Jason Mikas, and while some of their characters try to give it their all with their performances, others are where it's noticeable that the motivation is just not there. It doesn't matter if they're penguins, seals, elves, humans, or all that sort of thing. This movie is loaded with an entire cast of generic and insufferable characters that offer no interesting traits, no funny humor, no sense of logic, and no reason why I should even care for them. Of course, this movie was released as a direct-to-DVD exclusive film, and my god, it really shows. But as a direct-to-video movie from 2004, however, this animation has not aged well at all. The visuals feel like they were direct from a Nintendo 64 game, with the rendering and execution of the textures and movements such as the mountains, snow, and some other elements looking like plastic, or the hair being sometimes stiff, as well as how the mouths move weird or don't even match to what the characters say, or how the characters can sometimes move in a jagged manner. As for the character designs themselves, maybe they would look nice on paper, but when translated into a computer-animated film, they look awkward. The Arctic animals feel bland and generic, and like I mentioned before, the designs of the penguins themselves remind me way too much of Pablo, plus Captain Crag almost looks more like a human than an actual walrus since he has no saber teeth, and Pup looks more like he has a baby face, which feels a bit off for a younger seal. The same goes for the humans like Santa, Mrs. Claus, and the mayor, who looks a lot like Mr. Monopoly. But when it comes to the elves, and especially the polar bear, they look ugly. Did it cost too much money for them to bring on board a professional artist to make them look good on computer? Every single elf looks like a dull caricature, and even their mouths can have bad rendering when they move. Even Max Elfman, the most annoying character in this movie, feels like he belongs in a classic Rareware game. And same thing with the polar bear that goes after Crystal and Lucinda when they reach the North Pole. I can safely say that he would look much suited for Norm of the North. I mean, he's a horribly animated polar bear just like Norm, right? Now, this isn't any of the animators' fault. I'm sure there is a bit of creative talent in here. It's just the execution and the rendering of it all that makes it look horrendous. In fact, there was actually a trailer for this film that presented the movie with 2D animation, and I wish that it looked like that instead of whatever this abomination is, where it feels like a late 90s video game that needs a patch to fix its bugs. And the effects are absolute garbage. Whether it be snowball explosions, cake bursting, ice breaking, water flow, fire, or whatever, they all look extremely cheap as if they were just downloaded directly from a random dollar store site, on top of some extremely cheap lighting. This is something I expect from Norm of the North. There are other computer animated films from 2004 that looked better than this, like The Incredibles, Shrek 2, even Shark Tale. And I'd even sit through the animation in Hoodwinked. The only redeeming qualities I can find in the visuals are that it does look colorful, and the city that represents the North Pole does look grand and mostly creative in terms of design. But otherwise, this is just a poorly animated, poorly rendered, and poorly executed mess that ends up becoming inexcusably bad, yet partially understandable for a direct-to-DVD film like this. I'm really sorry I got overly angry here. I just needed to get this review over with, because as I get older, certain opinions change, and I'm just really impatient to finish this off right now. So with that said, let's end this. The only way I can describe In Search of Santa is that it's the Norm of the North or Arctic Dogs of the 2000s. With a predictably broken story, unfunny cartoon slapstick, awkward pacing, completely unappealing characters, songs that barely add anything to the film, and low-quality animation that looks like it can't afford to be finished, it's no wonder people barely talk about this movie on the internet, and it ended up left into obscurity for years. You know, when I watched this as a kid, I think I understand why I had fun with it back then. It's because I turned off my brain. And that's exactly the kind of movie that this is. Turning off the brain while watching the movie is the only way one can really get through it. And if you succeed, more power to you. You go have fun with these penguins. Because without it, my recommendation is just avoid it at all costs. Your time to get more important stuff done is more valuable than to go through this thing. And because of the naughty things it did for me by wasting my time without my brain turned off, I am giving this one a lump of coal with a 2 out of 10 and the Dirksen stamp of failure. And now I'm off to go watch actual good Christmas movies. This is Caleb, over and out.
Santa Claus is a human lie.